I'm here with Anand Tucker, director of The Critic. Yeah, this is a really cool movie. Didn't go quite the way I was expecting it to. And this is based on a book, and I didn't get to read the book, Curtain Call by Anthony Quinn. One thing I like to ask people that do adaptations is what's kind of your thoughts on adapting adaptations? Because some people like to do it like we need to do it exactly like the original or as faithful to that as possible. And other people are like, I like the idea, but we're going to take a different direction on this.
Do you know, I think it entirely depends on the book and the circumstances of what kind of movie you think you can make. Because obviously, movies are really, really different from books. They're an entirely different experience. A book takes you inside your own head and gives you endless vistas of whatever you can imagine. A movie is like a series of images, and it's kind of pretty, the image is the image, and that's it. And they're kind of quite stupidly simple in some ways in how they tell their story. But I've done both. I produced a movie called The Girl with the Pearl Earring, which was based on a best-selling novel. And that was actually incredibly true to the novel, very, very truthful to it with Colin Firth and Scarlett Johansson. But this adaptation is actually the latter. So our amazing writer, Patrick Marber, who is one of England's finest writers, playwrights, screenwriters, writer of Closer and Dealer's Choice, amongst other things, Notes on a Scandal. He had been sent the book Curtain Call by Tony Quinn, and he really loved the book, but what he was really struck by was the world that Tony had created, sort of 1930s London theatre world, which was very particular, and in particular one character within the book, which is the character of the critic. And so, with Tony's permission, he took that character and kind of created a whole kind of, it's as if it's the sequel subplot, it's Robin's movie. If you can imagine that maybe, Curtain Call is Batman's story.
Yeah. Another thing that me about this is that in the movie, Ian McKellen's character, he, he's a critic, and I would say he's kind of an a-hole, because he's like, oh, I'm just being truthful, and it's like, are you though? I think you're digging a little deeper, digging a little harder than you need to. But he gets to start a conversation with one of the people he critiques. And what I do and what you're doing now is like an interview, but later on I'll be reviewing the movie. But there's never, it feels like with critics, once they review a movie or a food critic reviews food or whatever, the conversation stops there. What I liked about this was that it didn't stop there. And in fact, Ian McKellen just kind of walked away. He was trying to run away from it. But what's your take on critics in general? And why doesn't that conversation continue after the art's put out there and has been adjudicated?
Well, I think that's a really good question. So, and there's a number of questions in there, so I'll try my best.
Oh,
Forgive me if
yeah.
I miss anything. But I think the first thing is the 1930s was a very, very different time for how critics operated in a media landscape. There were very few outlets, very few national newspapers, and if you happened to be the theatre critic on a national newspaper in England, you were nationwide. Everybody read you. That's it. And there was nothing else. There was no other way to get any. If you're living 100 miles out of London or in South, that's it. Nowadays, of course, everyone is their own publisher, and there's, in a way, everyone's a critic, and that's great. We've democratized that. So the role and the voice, which I would still argue is very important. I think critics are incredibly important and artists in their own right. And I'm not just saying that. I'll come back to that. But obviously, back then, critics like Jimmy Erskine were gods, and they had the power to open or close shows, make or break careers. And Ian himself experienced that. So Ian McKellen obviously came out of that sort of world of the theatre in the 40s and 50s, which is a whole other world, and experienced what it was like to live in a world where these great beasts, as they were called, ruled with fear, in a way, I guess, like a Pauline Kael in the movie business, who had the power to, her opinion was what everyone, that was it. If she said it was good, it was good. If she said it was bad, it was over. What's interesting about that is, you can't just talk about the character of the critic, Jimmy Erskine, in the movie without having the context of the fact that he is actually a gay man who is succeeding in a world where he has to hide his true identity, who he is, because if it comes out who he really is, that's it. It's over. His life, everything is built. In fact, he'll probably go to prison or worse. So the stakes are incredibly high. And he's been living a lie all his life in one way. But his mission, and I think the thing that redeems this very, villainous character in the book, in the film, is the fact that he does believe in art, the power and purity of art for him as expressed through theatre, that this is something that's important. This is why we are here, right? Because we love movies, and movies, I would say, are an art form. And why? Because they show us how we are connected to other people. Art at its best does that. So Jimmy believes in the power and beauty of art, and he believes that there should be standards, right? And that he has a responsibility to his audience as well, right? Not to waste their money if they only earn so much and it's very expensive. And that also, I think quite rightly, as a critic, and he understands that the art that someone makes is not the person themselves, but many artists tend to confuse themselves with the thing they've made, and obviously get very, very upset. I know it's hard, but you're not your work, right? All that being said, I think it's a shame that the conversation doesn't go deeper nowadays, isn't more honest, because I think the finest critics illuminate great work. And they are, the way they can write about it, can take a receiver of that into places in the piece of work that you didn't even know, could open avenues out for understanding, can even actually take you to places and to go and see things that you never could. But it does require that critic to be true to themselves and to say the truth. And sometimes that's harsh. But I think the fault lies not with the critic. The fault lies with the so-called artists. If we are all too bloody lily-livered to take any criticism, we should be humble enough to listen. It's as simple as that. No one is a master apart from a handful of people. Martin Scorsese. The rest of us are, and scrabbling around just trying to do something the best we can, and we can always be better. Sorry, a very long answer, but
Oh no, that was a great answer. But also kind of so you and a whole team of people put a lot of time and care into this, and then you have someone like what's an example? Because you've done a bunch of movies. What's an example of like and I'm sure you've had plenty of movies reviewed. What's an example of something that's been like a fair critique, and what's an example of something where like you're just being a dick?
well, I don't, here's the thing. Even the worst reviews I'd had, and I'll give you a couple because I've had some stinkers, right? They all have a kernel of truth in them for the person who wrote the review, right? So my first film was a film called Hilary and Jackie, and I was super lucky that it got into the Venice Film Festival. It was amazing. I was 30 years old and go off to the Lido in the 90s, and we have the big gala, and we're all waiting for the reviews the next morning in the sumptuous hotel on the canals. And it's the main Italian newspaper comes in and open the paper, and the reviewer goes, the first lines were, "This movie stinks worse than the Venice canals in the height of summer." Now, Jimmy Erskine could have written that. Anyway, basically, the Italian reviewer absolutely hated the film. And I've been thinking about it over the years, and actually in the end, you know what? I think the failing was probably on my part, because although I think the movie's okay, I don't think it's a stinker. It's not a masterpiece or anything, but I think that what I hadn't done was universalize enough the very particularly British story of of Jacqueline du Pré, so that an Italian person could take on the cultural baggage that film had and see beyond the sort of silly Britishness and understand that it a lot of was going on beneath the surface of cups of tea, which for an Italian, that's not how they emote, right? In Italy, you say what you think. In Britain, we have a cup of tea if we want to murder someone. So I think in retrospect, I could have done better, I made another movie for a studio called Leap Year, which, it's good. Yeah, it had its moments, but I remember there was a editorial in the Irish Sunday Times that said I should be banned from ever traveling into Ireland for the crime of having made this movie with its multitude of, Irish cliches. They had a point, but it was made with love. What can I say?
I mean,
I don't know. I think all criticism is valid. Honestly, I do. And if you are so sensitive that you can't understand that you're not your work, I'm not my work. I'm not Leap Year or whatever,
yeah.
I'm me.
But like the two examples he gave is like there's definitely hyperbole in there, and I don't know. Like when does it cross the line, and when is like hey, the thing I did you didn't like, and that's fair for these reasons, but it like the crime.
Yeah,
I don't think you committed a crime.
no, but I think, listen, I enjoy it when critics are entertaining. I'm the
Uh,
first to turn to my wife in the morning, who's also director, and if we read a review of someone's a film and it's like one of those, you kind of share it and laugh. It's entertaining, and you're in. Listen, critics are writing for an audience too. I get it,
yeah.
and it's your duty to entertain. It's your duty to inform and to entertain. Right now, you would hope that one would do that with that the writing, whatever is around the terrible Barb, that whatever is around it, at least has a modicum of understanding of filmmaking. That the critic themselves, you can tell, loves movies too, and understands movies, and then it might not be their kind of movie. It might be maybe they just hate rom-coms,
Yeah.
and think they're all terrible. But that doesn't mean that, but so long as the critic is honest about where they're coming from, then I'm fine with that. What I have a problem with is if, like it said to anything, if it becomes personal, or if clearly the person who's writing the review or whatever has no real understanding of the form that they're writing about. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I wish we could continue this conversation after I reviewed the movie. Unfortunately, I loved it, so there's not going to be much to talk
Oh,
about. But
oh, okay. Here's the thing. If you don't, I'm gonna come and find you.
there you go.
I know where you live.
But I do kind of want to end on this. I just want to get an idea of like a movie that you really love that's like maybe a lesser champion. Like people talk about like The Godfather and Citizen Kane, but like what's like a movie that's like I really like this and not enough people talk about it.
Well, I don't know if not enough people talk about it, but I absolutely one of my favorite movies of, well, two. I'll give you two. In the Mood for Love by Wong Kar-wai, which is for me, and I know many people, but it is like the movie that's broken my heart and I love more than any other. And I probably ripped off more than, in fact, I shouldn't have said that, because if you look at the critic, you'll see how I've shamelessly just basically ripped off Wong Kar-wai and
I mean, if you're
Christophe.
gonna rip off anyone, that
Oh, I mean, and then you have to see The Grandmaster. Have you seen that? His Wong Kar-wai's movie, The Grandmaster. Oh
yes.
my God. Sorry. Anyway, and the other film is the most perfect film ever made, which is Groundhog Day. Basically, the greatest movie ever made, the ultimate genre film about the whole meaning and point of life. It's just genius. So
I,
there you
lo-
go.
I love it. Well, yeah. The Critic comes out in theaters September 13th. And then, I messed up your name again. But that you've been an absolute joy. Thanks for joining me, and congratulations on a banger.
Cheers, mate. I really appreciate it. Lots of love.